and welcome back to the Crag Chat Climbing Podcast. Today I have Kristi with me, and I'm very excited to have her on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So, tell me a little bit about how you got started climbing, because you currently manage a campground for climbers at the River Gorge, and I'm interested to see your journey from not climbing to where you're at today.
I actually didn't do any kind of sports or activities growing up as a kid. But when I was in college in North Carolina, I had a roommate who was a climber, and one day she was just like, hey, I need someone to belay me. Can you come to the gym? I'll teach you. And I was like, yeah, I'm just sitting around doing nothing. I'll do that. So I started climbing in a gym. Shortly after I got into top rope climbing, she got a boyfriend. And then classically, they were all partnered off. So I started bouldering. And then that's kind of where I really got into climbing, or I got more involved in the community, started climbing outdoors. And then when I graduated college, I moved to West Virginia. I worked at Waterstone Outdoors for some time, which is just the local gear shop.
Mm-hmm. I've been there. It's cute.
Yeah, it's great. I lived in the campground, as a permie or permanent camper. And then one day the campground manager, Natalie at the time, was like, hey, I'm quitting. You should apply. And I was like, okay. And then now here I am.
Well, that's a great progression from going climbing with your friend. Well, not even climbing, you were belaying.
Yeah.
And then now you're living at the River Gorge. That's awesome. And we were talking about this before. You have a bunch of Airbnbs in the area, and you're building a tiny house. Lots of exciting changes coming your way. So, congrats on that. So, I have a funny story for you that you might not know. You'll probably remember it. We want to give a shout out to the people that give money to this campground, because my husband actually, when we checked it in here, the computers were going really slow. And you told him, you looked him in the eye, and you were like, please tell them that we need money for new computers. And it was so funny. I was waiting in the car the whole time. I had no idea. And I was like, what is taking so long? He comes back and he was like, yeah, the girl up there that was working there was like, please. It was so funny.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's true. The internet here is also very terrible.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the way that it goes in rural types of places, but it just cracked me up that was the connection. By a complete chance, I started following you on Instagram a couple weeks later, and I was like, wait, I think that's the same girl. So it was funny. So speaking of Instagram, you're starting up with this coaching business and everything, which is really exciting. You made a post that was really interesting about your favorite 510s in the River Gorge. Can you tell me about some of those and why they're your favorite?
Yeah. I mean, 510 is kind of one of those grades here. The new is notoriously sandbagged, as they say.
I'm glad that you said that, because I've tried to say that and people have cut me down. They're like, no, you just climb at the red too much. And I'm like, I mean, that's true.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just really hard. And so 510 is kind of that grade that is a little bit more accessible. So I kind of wanted to provide a list of my go-to routes for people. Looking back at my list, I put a lot of the ones that are on there are to please the masses, you know what I mean? But for example, my number one favorite is Brain Tweezers at Beauty Mountain. And the reason I really like that one is because it's one of those routes that you can climb probably in 3 to 5 different ways. Every single time I climb it, it's a totally different route. And I find that one of the things that it really highlights is balance. It almost forces you to learn opposing body positioning and how that works on the wall. Mm-hmm. It's in a gym, how route setters, they'll set something and they want you to force a bicycle move or something like that. It's almost as if
it's nature tried to do that for you.
Yeah, nature was here, you need to learn how opposing balance works on the wall. Go climb this.
Well, that's awesome, because I know that that's one of the first things that I noticed about climbing at the New is how even the lower grade climbs, they make you think. And a bunch of people have always said this, like, climbing is more mental than it actually is physical, or, you know, it's an even 50-50 split. But that's one of the reasons that I like climbing at the New. And I think that that's something that, if you haven't climbed at the New, if you're listening to this and you haven't climbed here and you come here, the first couple times that I came here, I'm going to be completely honest, I was like, I'm not about it. Because it made me think, you know? But as I've climbed more and more here, and more outdoors in general, I've come to, appreciate the more technical side of things and, like, the balancing things. So that's cool. You have a couple, so you said Brain Tweezer. What about, like, Low Voltage was one of the ones. Is that one to appease the masses, or?
No, that one's just, like, my go-to Kmore warm-up. Like, every day I go to Kmore, I will climb that thing. Like, it's fun.
Is it slab? Is it overhung? What's it like?
It's face climb.
Uh-huh.
I'd say it's a little pumpy for a face climb. And it has just, like, a really big, like, stand-up undercling move that's really cool. And you're like, oh, yeah, I feel really cool right now.
Do you have, like, a specific type of hold that's, like, your favorite type of hold if you had to pick one?
I really enjoy crimps.
Crimps? Okay.
Yeah.
Because, like, my one friend, her favorite type of a hold is an undercling. And I'm like, what? I mean, I'm not judging, that's great, but I just struggle with undercling so badly. I'm like, I'm glad that's your favorite type of hold.
I think, actually, that might be... I see that now. That could be, like, maybe my second favorite now that you mention it. Because, honestly, like, around here, as a shorter climber, it's, like, one of the things, like, as I'm, like, processing on the wall, I'm like, okay, are there better feet? No? Okay, is there an undercling?
Yeah.
And then that'll, like, save your day and make those bigger moves a little bit less big.
Yeah.
If you can find a mysterious undercling.
Huh. That's something that I've never thought about. The setters at our gym just set her out that the first move is like this undercling, but then the first foot is a really, really high foot. So if you're short, you're just pretty much like, it's really, really hard because you're like trying to stand up into undercling on a foot that's like at your, and so yeah, maybe that's just why I don't like underclings, just because I tend to not be good at them. So, okay, you've spent a lot of time at the New, obviously. You've been, like, living here for a while. But besides the New, like, what's, like, a memorable climbing trip somewhere else? Like, somewhere you really liked?
Yeah. I go to Chattanooga a lot. So, I want to say that's probably one of my top places to boulder. I actually prefer to boulder, even though I live in a sport climbing destination.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask because you got started bouldering, but
yeah, so I really like the bouldering in Chattanooga. Another place that I really, really like is Waco Tanks. I've only ever gotten to go there once before COVID, and then every winter I like plan to go back, and it's just been like not the time to go.
What'd you like about it?
The rock is really different, but mostly like the style of climbing. I mean, there's two kinds of styles. Like, there's like the steep overhanging, like knee bar shenanigans, and then there's like in-cut amazing crimps on like a slightly overhanging face, which is like...
It doesn't seem like you have a bias there at all.
Yeah, no, like the steep in-cut crimps, I'm for it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I really like about that. And I've also been to, like, you know, Red Rocks and Bishop, but honestly I feel like I don't know, none of those places are the New, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. Then there's some bouldering near the campground here, right? How are those boulders? Are they anything worth writing home about?
Yeah, so actually, like, the bouldering in the New is really good. Like, people don't maybe know about it as much. It's kind of gaining in popularity. But yeah, there are a handful of boulders on the campground. It's called the Tug and Shack. I feel like those are pretty challenging for the grade.
We've always tried to climb them every time we've been here, and then we can either bring like crash pads, or we can bring all of our sport climbing gear, and it's like, because we drive a Prius, so it's like, and half the time, or like before, we were sleeping in the Prius too, so we're like, crash pads aren't gonna work. So we tried to make it work last time. Actually, we have a mutual friend, Liz. Last time we were here, she's like, yeah, we'll go do it. And then we were all so tired by the time we got back. We're like, nah, never mind.
Yeah. It's kind of nice, though, because, like, you know, the sport climbing season usually goes through, like, November. And then bouldering season, like December, January, February, March, you can boulder here, and the temps are great.
Yeah.
So.
I know that I have someone from a gym near Cleveland, or rather in Cleveland, that he comes here like all the time during like December when it's like there's like snow and stuff, because the bouldering is really good. He loves it. So yeah, I really wanna get out to like is it Waco?
Waco. Yeah.
Waco? Okay. Really want to get out there. And then Chattanooga, is that Little Rock City or is that different?
Yeah, so there's Stone Fort, or LRC, they call it. And then Rocktown is super fun.
Okay.
And that's actually, it's in Georgia, but I say it's in Chattanooga, it's all one.
Yeah. So, like, from what I've heard, it's like someone described it as an outdoor gym. Like, basically, there's just, like, rocks everywhere. That's how I felt when I went to the Obed. I don't know if you've ever been.
I've never been.
So, there's a place called the Lily Boulders at the Obed, and, like, yeah, you basically, it's just, a half-mile trail, like, it's nothing. You walk in, and then there's just boulder, and, like, I went there by myself, so I set up everything, and I, like, climbed a problem, whatever, and then I, like, picked my crash pad up to, like, go find the next problem. I, like, packed everything up, and it was, like, the next boulder over, like, 10 feet away, and I was like, oh, I could have just drug it over.
Yeah, that's definitely like one thing that the new river bouldering doesn't have to offer.
Mm-hmm. And the new in general, because I find that the new sport climbs too are much more spaced out. At least the crags that I've been to are much more spaced out than other areas that I've been to. Coaching. I want to talk a little bit about coaching. So you've been part-time, doing coaching part-time, and then now you're making the jump to full-time. Tell me a little bit about who you're looking to work with, like what your ideal client would be, and like what you feel your strengths as like a coach are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started coaching in 2019, and at the time it was like, you know, a couple of my friends, like locally. And so I've been doing that part-time since then, but now I've quit the campground and I'm looking to like transition to coaching full-time. I guess you could say my ideal client is, you know, like when I first started coaching, I thought my ideal client was going to be the like outdoor climber like myself, like somebody who primarily climbs outside and maybe doesn't have access to as much like equipment, tools, resources to train. But it's actually evolved to essentially be, you know, like those who are climbing in the gym, who are looking to climb outdoors. And probably 90% of my clients are looking to climb outdoors in the new. So I guess you could say my ideal client is the new river climber.
Well, that's interesting, and, like, it's a good thing because that was your exact transition, right? Is, like, you went from that gym climber into climbing in the new, so what better person to give you advice about how to do that than someone that's done it?
Exactly.
That's great. So as far as you, in your coaching, do you have specific, like, programs, or are there specific, like, tell me a little bit about what the format of it all is.
Yeah, so I'd say, like, the bulk of what I do now is just custom training plans. I'm hoping to have some more like PDF programs and whatnot in the future, but honestly, I find the most joy from just creating like completely customized training plans. So whether it's like just a strength training and hangboard plan, or I'll do like climbing specific plus strength training plus hangboarding. Some people come to me for like mindset support, and then I'll kind of interweave that into their training program depending on what their goals are. But essentially everything's 100% customized.
So that's really interesting to me because, like, what's an example of mindset training versus physical training? Because everyone's, like, I feel like everyone hounds that, like, oh, you gotta hangboard, you gotta do your strength training, you gotta do your limit boulder, like, all this, right? But then, like, it's mindset training. Like, that's all I know. So, like, what's an example, and, I mean, obviously you don't have to dive too deep into, like, your programming, but, like, I'm just curious to hear more about that side of it.
Yeah, totally. So I kind of take more of a, like, mindfulness approach. I'm also a yoga instructor.
Oh, okay.
So a
Cool.
lot of my teaching, I guess, stems from my personal experience as a yogi and also through yoga therapy. So obviously, the first thing that comes to mind for most people is meditation. So sometimes I'll program in like guided meditations. One thing that I like to do is program, like literally write in journal prompts for people. A lot of like self-reflection. Sometimes it looks like specific climbing drills on the wall that are focused around breath or body awareness. Sometimes it looks like something as simple as like take practice falls. You know, it really just depends on what sorts of tools I think would work best for that athlete and kind of what jives well with them. You know, like some people, if I'm like, oh yeah, you need to meditate 5 minutes,
they're like,
as your warm up, they're like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, well, that's really cool, and I really appreciate like the individual approach to the training, because I feel like there's so many, this is just my perspective on training, and this is also coming from someone that's bought and ditched a training plan for absolutely no reason. Shout out to Lauren. Good spray. Love her. I will get back to it, I promise. No, just I guess my perspective on training is like, I really like the like individualized approach to it, because like there's so many, if I'm going to go out there and look online, there's so many resources out there for free that I can just like pick and choose and like, I don't know, make my own training plan. So if I'm going to like go to someone with the intent of being like, I would like to train specifically for my body and my mindset and all that, I really like the idea of like the individualized. So, and like, so is this more remote based training, or because you're in the new, do you meet up with clients, or how's that work?
So I primarily do remote training, and I use an app. It's called True Coach, but I do have a couple local clients, one of which who just uses my gym. So like I have a home gym, and local clients, I allow them, if they purchase a program, they can use my facility. Some of them I work one-on-one with, so we'll do strength training together. Most of them, I'll just check in on them and be like, hey, how's it going? And they're like doing their own thing. But I recently got my SPI certification. So I'm hoping to provide more like one-on-one in-person coaching at the Crag and
That'd
take
be awesome.
people out climbing.
Yeah, so explain for someone that might not know, definitely not me, what is SPI? What does that stand for? And what are the like qualifications or the steps that you have to take to get it?
Yeah, so the SPI is a single pitch instructor, and it's a certification that's provided by the AMGA, or the American Mountain Guides Association. The way I see it, and they might hate me for saying this, is it's just like a stamp of approval. Like, you have gone through the education process, you know how to like instruct, you know how to build systems, and you know, teach climbers the appropriate skills that they need to climb outdoors in the best way possible.
I mean, I wouldn't hate you for saying that. That's basically my perception of it, but I also think it's probably like a big safety feature too, to make sure that you do have that stamp of approval. They're not just letting anyone go out there, right?
Yes, exactly. It's not like you're just letting Joe Schmo from the gym teach you how to rappel.
Yeah, exactly. Not to interrupt, but there's a local crag near Cleveland called Whips Ledges, and I do not know why, but it attracts just like the most random assortment of like climbers in general. We met a guy that had been like sport climbing in like Spain and whatever, and then he's like at Whips, and it's like 20-30 foot walls that aren't even like bolted, like your top, which I'm not knocking that. It was just like interesting to me to see people that are like going out all over the world climbing all these big things, then they come to Whips Ledges. But then, like, to your point, the whole safety thing, there's like a guy that he was like, yeah, I had a buddy that climbed, I thought that sounded pretty fun, so yeah, I do he like cuts down trees for a living, and he's like, so yeah, I'm just kind of using the same stuff, and he's like on this like meat hook and like this static rope, and we're like, okay, like maybe don't do that, you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like that's the Joe Schmo, just like, yeah, I'll take you out.
Yeah, I just rigged up a tree once.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like, he knew what he was doing from like climbing a tree level, but that always doesn't work the best on, like, when you're climbing a rock face and taking falls on a static rope.
Yeah, definitely don't take falls on a static rope.
Yeah, it was concerning. We were like, here, sir, like, you can climb with us.
Yeah, definitely don't take lead falls on a static rope.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Whipster's not even, like, lead routes, so,
Yeah.
like I'm saying, but, so you currently completed all the guidelines or all the qualifications to get that this past week?
Yes.
So this is new.
This is new. Like, I just finished on Wednesday.
So what'd you have to do?
So we took a course, which was a 3-day, I believe it was 3 days. Yeah. 3 whole days course of like 8 to 5 training. And we did that with Elena Arans from New River Mountain Guides, which was great. Lots of learning. They teach you how to like set up like rappels and like blade rappels, tie all these fancy crazy knots, set up like a Joshua Tree V-rig system. I don't know, all of these things that I knew nothing about up until the course. And then we had a month where we just practiced all of our skills. Thankfully, Elena had like mentored us and like took us outside of the course. And then after a period of time, we took the exam with Kyle Kent from Appalachian Mountain Guides. And they just tested us on all of the different systems. And we had to like give a lesson, you know, like teach somebody how to top rope belay. We had to lead a trad route. They like checked our gear. You also had to show movement efficiency up to 5'8". So we top roped a 5'9". Funny story, I actually cried.
Did you?
During this moment, during the exam.
Why?
And they still passed me, believe it or not. It was a route, it was called Chalkstone at Bridge Buttress. It's like a 5'9" crack. And it was on top rope. They were like, yeah, just climb this. We want to see if that you can move at the 5'8" level. You know, puts us on 5'9". And I was like, okay.
5'9" crack.
5'9" crack.
There's a difference.
Exactly. So I had climbed it in the past, and it had been years probably since I've climbed it, but I knew where the crux was, and I climbed up there right before the crux and like at a good stance. I looked down. I was like, Elena, do I have to go all the way to the top? And she's like, yeah, you know, it would be great, blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
basically
okay.
A yes, but like, yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah, please. So I was like, okay. And then, you know, it's like emotionally started to like build in my mind because I knew it was like hard, burly. It's like really burly and kind of insecure. Of course I was on top rope, but to me, none of that matters.
Yeah.
And so I like started to move through the crux. And then as I'm like moving through it, I immediately just like start bawling, like crying. And then I like get to another good stance, put my face in the wall, like lean in and just like cry for like 2 whole minutes. And then finally I like, you know, gathered myself and like made it to the top.
Yeah.
But I feel like oftentimes when I'm like trying really hard, it's almost like you get all this like emotions that like, you know, either we're repressing or for me it's repressing for sure. And then when you like try really hard on the wall, they just like get released.
Yeah.
And there's just like emotions everywhere. And then I'm just like immediately crying.
Yeah. Well, can I just say, I love that you shared that so much because I feel like crying and rock climbing are more together than people think. Like, I think that when people think rock climbing, they're like, oh, like, gonna go out and be a badass and rock climb, but it's like you can also be a badass and cry. That is completely normal and acceptable. So yeah, well, I'm glad that you got through the climb. Now if you're going out guiding with people and they start to cry, you're like, hey, we had the same experience.
Hey, I've done that.
So actually I have a goal to try and do 100 510As in the Red River Gorge. There's no like deadline, I just want to do it. We went to a crag that had 3 510As. I was like, cool, we'll knock them all out. We counted the routes and we miscounted, so I jumped on a 510C at the beginning, and like that's a difficult grade for me. Wore myself completely out trying to get to the top of this, and then another party came through and was like, that's like a C or a D, that's not an A. But I had climbed it twice trying to like, because I fell at like a hard part, and then I was like, I'm just gonna come down, rest, and I'll try it again. So then I like rested, went up it, finally, like, struggled my way to the top. And then immediately, the 10A that my friend was climbing, they're like, oh, it's open now if you want to climb it. And, like, me being stubborn and, like, not taking enough rest, I was like, yeah, I'll go climb it. And then obviously I'm like struggling on this route, and I had kind of the same reaction where I was just like, I got to the point where I was just like, these tears are like building up, and I was like, I can't get it, and I was so frustrated. It's like, I think that's how you know that it matters, right? Is that like you actually have some sort of emotional response to it.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's like really, really common. And really good, probably, because, like, you're saying, like, for you, it's, like, repressed emotions. It's probably good to let a little bit of that out, huh?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, you know, when it comes to, like, people ask me all the time, they're like, I don't know how to try hard, you know? And at least from a personal perspective, like, when I tap into my try hard, I'm actually, like, tapping into an emotion and, like, what is, like, fueling me, whether it's, like, a hard project that I'm trying to do, right? Like, I'm going back to, like, emotionally, like, why is this important to me? Mm-hmm. And then that is usually, like, the driving force that gets me to the top, you know, or, like, gets me through the cracks. It's, like, an emotion. Whether it's, like, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, or motivated, or excited, you know?
Yeah.
Inspired.
That's really, really interesting, because I actually have a hard time trying hard. And I think for me, it's that a big obstacle for me is that in every sport, so unlike you, I grew up playing almost every single sport. I am that person that's, like, mediocre at everything. Like, mediocre at everything athletic. Like, I remember I was laughing because it was a state meet, and we went and ran. There was 130 runners, and I was runner number 75. Like, I placed 75th. Like, dead in the middle. I'm like, this just happens every time. No, like, I have a hard time trying hard, so the whole, like, tapping into an emotion is, like, I think that because I just always feel like, oh, well, no matter what I do, I'm gonna be mediocre. You know, it's, like, hard for me to try hard. It's like, well, no, obviously, like, if you just tried hard, then you wouldn't be mediocre. You know what I mean? Like, that whole thing. So you talked about motivation a little bit. What's, like, your motivation behind climbing? Are there any people that motivate you, and, like, what do they do to motivate you?
That's actually a funny question. Honestly, I'm really motivated by kind of, like, competition. And when somebody tells me I can't do something, like, I like to, like, just prove people wrong. Uh-huh. So somebody, I guess, who, like, motivates me or inspires me in, like, a really weird way is a friend named Matt. He is, like, one of the first people who, like, has mentored me in the outdoor climbing world. When I first moved to the area and I was living in the campground, I went climbing with him a bunch. You know, like, at the time I was climbing, like, 5'10", and he taught me a lot about just being an outdoor recreational climber. But I feel like he has a lot of his own personal mindset around people's abilities, and, like, especially women and their abilities as climbers. And so a lot of my motivation has always just been to, like, kind of prove to him that I'm a competent climber and that I can climb really well and far surpass his expectations. Mm-hmm.
And as a climber, not as a female climber.
Definitely as a female climber.
Oh, as a female climber.
Definitely.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. I hear you. I know exactly the type of relationship. Yeah, I saw a comment the other day. It was a male climbing YouTuber who I really admire. He makes great videos, but it frustrated me because someone had commented, when a girl's getting on your project and flashing it, you might want to train a little harder. And I'm like, that's just, like, come on, it's 2022. What are you doing, you know? So I appreciate your dedication to proving that, you know, we're just as valid of climbers as anyone else is, for sure.
Yeah, or even, like, as a short climber. You know, like, just proving to people that, like, as a short climber, quote unquote short, I can still do this.
How tall are you?
5'4".
5'4", okay, so we're about the same height then.
Yeah, I know. I remember, like, looking into, like, one of the really, really old New River guidebooks, and there's, like, a glossary that's, like, defines terms, you know, like beta, Gaston, and that says short, 5'5" and below.
Oh my gosh, it like defined what short was as a climber. That's hilarious. One of my favorite, I don't know, do you know American Ninja Warrior at all? Do you
a little bit?
Do you know Barclay Stockett? She's one of my favorite short like climbers slash American Ninja Warrior. I believe she's 5'2". One of the obstacles is like this spider wall. Like bounce off this trampoline, go over this water, and then basically like bridge yourself hands and feet in like a spread out position between two walls. And she goes, I literally at 5'2" can only get one of my hands flat and the other side I'm like fingertipping. You know, and so it's like, when I was listening to that, I was actually thinking about, you know, like, you hear it a lot in the climbing community, like, oh, well, they just did that because they're tall. Or, like, well, you know, if you're shorter, you're just going to have to, like, learn how to, like, adapt and, like, you can't even do certain climbs or whatever. So I actually think it's really cool when shorter climbers, like, people are like, that's impossible. And they're like, I will find a way, you know? Like, I'll find a way to do it, so... What are some things that you do being like shorter to reach certain holds or things like that?
One thing I've found really helpful for me is just like training specifically end ranges of motion. So like the most simplest way would be like a scapular pull-up, like from a fully extended position or your arms fully extended. Same thing with like squats, like deep squats. But other than that, I'd say like specifically strength training and power training. And strength and power training to me are kind of like one and the same. But I've found that since I've started strength training, that my ability to exert more power on the wall has increased dramatically.
Yeah.
And so that's really helpful if you're like dead pointing or jumping or being just a more dynamic climber.
Yeah, I'll have to send you this video. There's a kid at my gym, and you know, youth team kids, like, they'll outclimb anyone, right? But, there's a kid at my gym, he did a heel hook on this problem that I still, to this day, I'm like, how did you manage to get your body in that space? And it's because, you know, of him being shorter, so... We talked about music, like I asked about gym music, and how do you say Queen Herbie or whatever? I don't know how to say her name.
Yeah, Queen Herbie.
Is there any music that lately you've been, like, what's a song that you're, like, vibing to right now?
Honestly, Queen Herbie. But the song that I have on repeat right now, it's called New Bitch.
Okay, love it.
But essentially... there's just a line that she's like, something, new bitch, now she picks and chooses.
Oh, okay.
Like, essentially, like, I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I get to pick and choose what things I say yes to and what things are, like, worth my time and energy. So that song has kind of been, like, a mantra for me.
That's amazing.
But other than that, honestly, I listen to nothing but Queen Herbie.
That's all. She's great, and I had never heard of her before you recommended her, and now that's literally what I lift to. So thank you for that. I've been listening to the Struggle Climbing Podcast. I'm going to shout out to them. Really enjoy the work that Ryan's doing there. What's something that you struggle with as a climber that you're like trying to improve personally?
Yeah. So mindset. Definitely. I guess you could maybe say emotional regulation if you want to talk about me crying on the wall. But mindset specifically, fear of falling. The new is like notoriously kind of run out a little bit.
I would agree.
So it is hard as a climber, just a person to climb here. And every year I like go through the same thing where I like spend some time off the wall, I'm not on lead, and then I gotta like get back into it. And I've kind of adopted my own way of like managing it, but I'm looking to like expand that. So some things that I'm doing to work on it, to be honest, I haven't been climbing at all, like none. This is like maybe a little personal, but I'm seeking therapy. So according to my therapist, I have PTSD, which is whatever. Yes, I have trauma. We all have trauma to some degree. So I've been working with both my yoga therapist and another therapist who specializes in like EMDR to just process trauma from my childhood. I also have a lot of trauma around like climbing. I've had a lot of injuries climbing. So just generally like trying to process trauma. I think that's like a whole different way to approach like mindset training for climbing, but I think that that's like really getting to like the root of the fear and like what's holding me back, as opposed to like, oh, let's take practice falls. So that's one thing I've been doing. It involves no climbing at all.
You know what though, like I think that that's probably one of the most important things that you can do, because if you're not good, just like, well, sorry, I'm not trying to say you're not good as a person, but if you're not just like, if there's things that you have to work on as a person, that definitely translates to the wall, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing that with me. I know that that's like, yeah, a personal thing, so congratulations on taking steps towards, you know, improving yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that you're definitely like not alone in the fact that I think that a lot of climbers could benefit from, a lot of non-climbers even can benefit from, like, you know, talking about their feelings and talking about the things that have happened to them in the past. You said everyone has trauma, and yeah, it's true.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, you know, like when people consult with me, like as a coach and on like mindset training, like sometimes like hearing their stories, I am like, this is my recommendation for you. Like we can like try to work on like meditation practices and like build awareness and journal and all these things, but like sometimes you just need that professional support.
Yeah, for sure. I know that I talked in a previous podcast episode, I found it really interesting. Kaya, she does some work with like a female-based climbing group, and she was saying that one of the ways that they overcome like past traumas or things like that is by putting people in hard obstacles that they have to overcome, and that often comes out in the form of climbing. It's interesting because when she was talking about it, actually, she was saying that a lot of people had the same reaction as you did on that 5-9, where like they're trying so hard and then they start crying, and it's just like, yeah, that's so neat that like climbing can bring out that kind of emotion in us.
Definitely.
But it's been really, really great talking to you. I've really enjoyed having you on, and tell people where they can find you if they want to get you as a coach or just get involved with what you're doing.
Instagram is the best way to probably find me. My handle is just at Kristi, Kristi, Buckley, Buckley. I'm revamping my webpage soon, but that's just KristiBuckleyTraining.com. And temporarily, you can still find me at the AAC campground. I'll actually be co-coordinating the Crag Classic this year, so you can also see me there.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being on, and thank you to all of our listeners for listening. Cheers. And one more thing, before you go, if you do want a beer that's non-alcoholic, that tastes great, go to athleticbrewing.com and just use my code Courtney S20 at checkout to get 20% off your first purchase, and that helps support me in the channel.